It's one of the most searched D&D terms on the internet, how to make a good dungeon. And no wonder. The dungeon crawl is a quintessential aspect of the game, else we'd be playing High Rises and Humans, or Shambling, Mounds, and Shopping Malls. But what actually makes a dungeon fun? And how can you keep your players engaged, equipped, and emotionally captivated throughout a 2-hour, 4-hour, or even a multi-session crawl? I'm by no means a master builder, but I've crafted more than a few daring delves for my players. Whether I feel like it's time to venture beyond the dark open world and into the clutches of a deep, dark lair, here are a few factors I consider. What's the difference between a grocery list and a recipe? Narrative pacing. When cooking up something delightful for your players, consider how different ingredients work together to create a more complex, holistic experience. Think about it this way. If every room in our dungeon is a deadly, duke it out to the last sliver of HP monster battle, those battles become slogs. If every single room is a ruthless, stupefying puzzle, those puzzles go from fun and exciting to just another thing to get through. Just as no one wants a multi-course meal of nothing but carrots, no offense if you are fiercely Team Carrot, too much of anything, even a good, fun thing, puts off players' appetites. Good dungeons understand it's the mix of different elements that make a dungeon crawl so fresh and exciting. Maybe one room is super hard, and the next is deceptively simple. Maybe after doing 13 different ability checks, your players discover the suspicious door in the corner really is just a door. But the next time they walk up a staircase, they find themselves grappled by the tongue of a waiting mimic. When preparing my dungeon, I'm also careful to consider what kind of players I'm working with. Is this party used to slashing and dashing their way through their problems? Are they a studious coterie of wizards? Or maybe they're a good balance of skills, abilities, and personalities whose ultimate challenge is just working together. Now, this doesn't mean that if my players aren't particularly fond of puzzles, I won't throw a brain teaser or two in the mix to stump them. In fact, if they're used to slicing and dicing, it can be fun, challenging, and otherwise hilarious when they can't just hack their way through. However, this also means that I incorporate rooms and mechanics that draw on their characters' strengths, stretching their limits and giving them the opportunity to show off what they designed their characters to do. The key is to challenge your players to get creative and work together, but also to give each individual an opportunity to shine. Is there a roulette-style magic puzzle your wild magic sorcerer can manipulate? Or maybe it's time for the artificer to team up with the barbarian, refinagling the base of a fire trap to construct a hot air balloon. Whatever the case, be sure to challenge your players' normal playing style. Encourage them to work together and highlight opportunities for individual characters to do what they do best. It is this fresh, funky mix that keeps everyone at the table having fun. What is agency? Basically, it's the character's ability to make choices based on their own thoughts and motivations. In other words, their ability to engage with an experience instead of things simply happening to them. Good dungeons have an aspect of choice. That choice can be as simple as a left turn or a right turn, but it can also be as nuanced as deciding whether or not to return a priceless magical artifact to its rightful owner. Yes, the Dungeon Master is ultimately master of the dungeon. However, if you want players to be invested in the adventure, they need to feel like they can play to their character's motivations and that those choices can have real consequences. If they're simply being puppeteered through the process, what's the point of even trying? Do good dungeons have traps? Puzzles, roleplay, combat encounters, survival challenges? All of the above. Please and thank you. In fact, feel free to combine elements to shake things up even more. I recently had the privilege of shadowing one of our veteran DMs through a dungeon crawl, and I watched in starstruck awe as he combined a twisted magical trap with an epic Drider battle. It was pretty clear that this strong group of players was used to muscling their way through problems, but the addition of the hazard in the middle of the battlefield, combined with the multi-dimensional movement of their foes, made for a much stickier situation. It can be tempting to assign dungeon rooms as just puzzle rooms or just combat rooms, but remember, this only limits your imagination. How might multiple elements come together into something fresh, challenging, and exciting? How can you turn your players' expectations on their heads? I recently ran a dungeon that reimagined the classic gelatinous ooze puzzle. Instead of simply having to fight the oozes to find the key inside, the players had to figure out how to retrieve the key, then use the oozes to build a staircase to the room's exit. In my humble, bardic opinion, the best part of any dungeon or dining experience is the nice, juicy stakes. In other words, the outcomes of the dungeon crawl needs to matter, both to the player and their player character. When coaching authors, I ask two simple questions to help them establish the stakes of their story. What happens if your main character succeeds? What happens if they fail? Are the stakes simply survival? Is there a cursed treasure to retrieve, a ticking clock, or a big bad to take down at the end of the dungeon delve? Why are the characters themselves invested in this adventure? Is the cleric after a secret artifact revered by their home temple? Is the paladin seeking to find out what happened to her long-lost father who disappeared in this same dungeon 20 years prior? Ask yourself, what's motivating the party to continue through room after room of these challenges? There doesn't have to be a complicated, lore-dumping backstory, but good dungeons appropriately incorporate carrots and sticks. If your players don't succeed, what less than desirable thing is going to happen? And if they do succeed, what do they gain? This is where it's fun to play with rewards. Vast hordes of treasure, invaluably rare magical items, the answer to a looming secret, a satisfying level up. This world is literally your oyster, so be sure to reward your players for a job well done. There's no hard and fast recipe for the perfect dungeon. Such a thing can't exist because everyone's tastes are different. However, as dungeon masters, we can be intentional about keeping things flavorful, incorporating narrative stakes, creativity, and the player's own strengths and weaknesses to flesh out a deliciously satisfying experience. The best way to get inspired is to dive right in and start playing. If you're looking for a place to start rolling, both literally and figuratively, why not check out our games at Young Dragon Slayers? Click on the link in our bio or description beneath this video to sign up for a game of D&D. Thanks so much and happy playing.